Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to Düsseldorf, the capital of the state of North Rhine-Westphalia and the longest bar in the world. I'm sure some of you have already tested a few meters of this and probably later, or more to come later today. Düsseldorf was founded in 1288 and has today 620,000 inhabitants and is, after Cologne, the second biggest city in North Rhine-Westphalia and surprisingly the seventh biggest one in the whole of Germany. According to Mercer studies, Düsseldorf is ranking number 6 of the cities with the highest standard of living in the world. Düsseldorf is not only known having the best carnival, but it's also known for its international airport, the fair, where probably we will see a lot of you guys again in next April on the Tube and Wire. And Düsseldorf is the headquarter of many banks, insurance companies, and after Frankfurt, the biggest center of finance and stock exchange. But Düsseldorf is also a fine city and known for fashion, arts, and has 22 universities of all sorts.
Not to mention he's from Düsseldorf, you can tell.
Most of us in the steel trade are confronted right now with huge challenges. The ongoing trade measurements, barriers, and trade wars have limited, changed, or stopped traditional trade flows to an extent, and none of us really would have expected such a change so rapidly. Unfortunately, it seems to become more and more fashion as many countries are meanwhile protecting their regions by copying what other cities and countries have done already, and so it is probably to be foreseen that this is not going to change soon and that we will hardly see a free trade world pretty soon again as we have experienced it over the last decades. Well, let us face this challenge and see how we can turn those restrictions to our benefit. And God thanks, traders have always been flexible in the past, and we can certainly much better and quicker adjust than our fellows from the steel producing side or consumer side, because they cannot shift so quickly as we could. So let's start with the questions from the panel, respectively from the audience which we have received from SteelOrbis. And we are starting with trade cases. The first question is from the audience. Do you expect the US and China to reach an agreement in the near future on a trade deal that will put an end to the tension between the two sides? What kind of impact has been observed on the steel trade so far, and what are your expectations if there is no deal in near future?
I guess I can talk about that. Number one, I don't think that we will have a full trade agreement with China. If anything, it will be partial, and I don't think it will be resolved in October like they're talking about. Most probably it's going to linger throughout the year. So really the tension is not going to go away, and recovery, if they do come with an agreement, recovery is also going to take time. Now, how it affects the steel trade, steel has already been restricted in the US. I think the majority of the steel that come out of China is not directly coming to the US. So how it will affect our steel prices in the US, I don't think it's going to have much, because there's not much coming to begin with. Now, if there is an agreement that will help the economy in China, and if it does help the economy in China, it's a good thing. That means Chinese will consume more of what they produce. That means there will be less steel that is forced to be exported. So that's the advantage I see worldwide, but not directly to the US.
I mean, the only possibility that we see, because as Mr. Baysal just mentioned, also China is not making the sufficient steel business with US. The only affection that we may see, especially for the local currency on RMB, because when the issue started, the RMB was 6.9%, and it's gone up to 7.8%. And that time we have started to see some aggressive offer from China by lowering the prices by $10. So if the agreement happens, then we will be seeing that RMB is going to come down in the level of, again, 6.9%, 6.9. So at that time, the China is not going to be longer aggressively offering in the market.
So you're saying if there's no trade deal, China will be more aggressive in the market?
As they are right now, yes.
Yeah. The problem is there's no market left, so we'll see.
So that's another problem.
Okay.
Coming to the second question, how much lower anti-dumping on countervailing duty rates do you expect for Turkish rebar exports to the US following the current review process? Will Turkish mills become a player again in the market?
Okay. Well, there's already a review, and with the review, the anti-dumping rates did, decrease dramatically. When I say dramatically, from average 7.5 to 1.5. So it is a major decrease. And also there were some artificially induced countervailing duties, and some of them already have, will be taken away. From what I understand, Habash had like crazy rate. Now it's going to be 3.8%. So overall, I think the anti-dumping rate for Turkey will be to a point where Turkey can compete with the rest of the countries that they have 25%. Given you gotta have to think about Turkey still has 25% duty, which is the major factor, but it will equalize the prices coming from Europe or Algeria or whatnot with the rest of the world. So that, I think Turkey will have a chance, if there is a chance. The problem is really they have to compete with countries like Mexico and Canada or Korea that has zero 232 duties. So that means there are countries that has zero, majority of them have 25%, and Turkey is like 27%. So that's the situation right now.
Okay, coming to the next part, raw materials. First question coming from the audience is, what is your outlook for iron ore price following the recent volatility? Can you give some outlook for that?
If you want, and let's see where we're going to go with it. But iron ore prices, went up dramatically. And when it goes over $100, $120, it just didn't make sense, and it did come down. I think we're in the range of 90 something, and will it come down more? If you look at the scrap prices, it looks like it will, but then again, we just recently saw that it starts going up again. So I guess in a way, the iron ore and scrap prices are not parallel or acting parallel with each other, at least what I see.
I mean, what we see is recently in 2019, the main reason that in China, the iron ore price increased because, as we all know, also in China, the production also increased as well by 9.9% compared to 2018. So, which is the numbers last year in the six months in 2018, the figure was 447 million ton, and in 2019, for the first 6 months, it was 492 million ton. So, which means that there is a demand on the iron ore, which also pushed the iron ore prices in uptrend.
Coming to the second question of that raw material item, billet versus scrap for the electric arc furnace and electric arc furnace versus BOF. in terms of production cost. Who do you like for the next 6 months?
We like them all, but I guess it depends on, I think every country is kind of built different. I can speak for the US, we're more oriented to scrap. Our majority of the mills in the US that produces long products are in electric arc furnaces. Now we do have the usage of the blast furnaces, but mostly for flat products. So, you know, if you were to compare, obviously, when the scrap prices are low, that really helps the long product producers in the US, and so they can easily compete with the rest of the world. As far as I know, Turkey is also, majority of the Turkish production is also on the electric arc furnace. Only there's a very small segment that produces with the blast furnaces, and that really is, again, majority of that production also is, I understand, flat products.
But given the fact that the difference iron ore price to scrap is so enormous, isn't there even a risk that scrap is really undervalued, and that we see that also BOF mills will try to use or to increase the amount of scrap in percentage and to subsidize this with iron ore?
Well, actually, majority of the mills in China, they have the versatility. They can go either way, and the Chinese producers, they look at the pricing and they decide if they want to go with the scrap or they want to go with the iron ore. So they do it within themselves that all the time. So yeah, if the iron ore prices go too far up, and they're going to go back to the scrap, which is abundantly available in China. But some countries, if their only production is iron ore, they have no choice.
Okay, coming to the next part of the questions, which is dedicating to China. What was the main reason prices dropped so sharply in China? Hussein?
One of the reasons that we've been seeing, especially in industrial area in Tangshan, the government policy on the cutting down on the production is more softening. So, which means the production is the increase. We clearly see the production increase. So, which is about so far in 2019 compared to 2018, 10%. And also, especially in China, in the month of August, the local consumption relatively is coming down compared to the other months. So that's the reason that we have been also seeing some inventories start to increase as well. And also, we've been seeing that the real estate sector in China also start to come down. This is one of the reasons. And also, there's one certainty is the US and the also Chinese trade war. This is one of the big effect, which is also affecting the also Chinese prices to come down as well. And as we've been seeing also the iron ore prices also some period of the time start to come down as well, than which we have seen also on the offer that we've been receiving from China. So those are the main factors.
So which one is more effective? Do you think it's because the iron ore prices or the raw material prices are going down because of that, or do you think it's because of the investments in the infrastructure is going down?
Actually, it started with the US and Chinese trade war. Then it affected also the economy. But generally, the production increase and the inventory accumulation was one of the reasons that is affected the drop in China.
So, second question to China, production and consumption in China 2019, and what are your expectations for the last quarter of 2019?
I mean, I just would like to share with you some of the figures about China. in 2018, the production in China was 927 million ton. And from January to July in 2019, the production was 576 million ton. So when we look at the production, monthly production average, in 2018, the average production was 77 million ton per month. In 2019, 82 million ton. So which we are clearly seeing 5 million ton increase averagely monthly production. So the general estimation, so we are estimating that end of the year, the China will be reaching about 990 million ton. So exports of China in 2000.
So when you see an increase of 5 million tons in 1 year, and you see a demand also lower, so that probably explains why the prices are going down.
Yes, sir. That's one of the main reasons as well, because most of the companies in China, including in the mills, their export, I can clearly say that minimum 40 to 50% came down, but it doesn't mean that they shut down the production. The production is still going on, but they've been supplying more to local markets. So the production, rather than cutting down the production, is increasing, like last year.
So they're stocking all.
Stocking.
Crazy.
And when we look at the export of 2018, the Chinese export was about 69 million ton. And in 2019, from January to July, the export of China was about 40 million ton. So most probably China is going to finish the 2019 with the 69 million ton export, which is almost similar with 2018 figures. So regarding the consumption, also in China, we clearly see that also the consumption in local markets start to increase as well. In 2018, the consumption was 873 million ton. And in 2019, from January to July, the total consumption was 535 million ton, which is referring that the average monthly consumption in 2018 was 72 million ton, and the average monthly consumption in 2019 was 76 million ton. So another 4 to 5 million ton, the local consumption increased per month. And
it's not reused, huh?
No, it's increased.
So this is all in stock saying. You're saying that all this material that you're talking about 5-6 million tons, not exported, but sitting in the warehouses.
That's right. The social, they call it social inventory, and the social inventory is the high. And we have a stock level as well in 2018 numbers. The averagely monthly, in the period of 2019, it was about 24 million ton stock level. And this year in 2019, we are seeing about 25 million ton. So 21 million ton in 2018 and 25 million ton in 2019. So we see about 4 million ton, the inventory also increased as well.
Yeah. Impressive numbers. So changing the subject, coming to Turkey. First question in regard of Turkish subject is production and consumption Turkey in 2019, and what are the expectations for last quarter 2019?
Again, if you go back to 2018, first 6 months, for the long product, Turkish production was about 13.4 million ton, 13.4 million ton. And in 2019, it was about 9.8 million ton. So which is about 26.5% for the long production in Turkey came down. For the flat product, it's about 8.3% came down. So averagely, is the production, it came down 20.2%. And when we look at the consumption, for the long product, we see 43.1% consumption came down. For the long product and for the flat product is about 21%. So totally 32%. So 20% production cut, 32% is the consumption. And so...
Did the exports increase at that time? I mean, obviously, now you're talking about a gap between the production and the consumption. Does that mean the exports increased?
Export is increased about 354% for the billets compared to last year. And also the production, general production in Turkey, it's also came down. And when we look at also scrap numbers, also the import of the Turkey for the scrap, I can say compared to 2018, it came down about 16%.
Export decreased?
Export
increased.
billets, yes. Okay, let me tell you the also export number as well. For the semi-product in 2019, for the long semi-product, is 58%. Export came down, 58%. And for the flat semi-product, also 53% came down. So totally, we are seeing 33% export came down for long plus overall, long plus flat product.
You said semi was minus 58.
Yeah, that's right. 58 to 53.
And long was down by?
Long was 58.
All right.
And the flat was 53.
All right.
So averagely 33%, including rest of the steel product.
All right. So coming to the second question, do you think we can assume Turkish exports are back in the US as they have managed to book an order recently, or will rebar sales from Turkey remain limited?
I think by all means Turkey is not back in the US right now, because one cargo, two cargo, this don't change. You're talking about coming down from 1 million tons to 10, 20,000 tons is nothing. So the Turks still have, 25%, let's say plus or minus 5%, so around 30% duty that they have to overcome, in comparison to, let's say, Mexico or Canada or obviously domestic production. Keep in mind the domestic production in the US uses the domestic scrap, which they can get every day. So there's a huge gap there, and the domestic, if they want to, they can decrease the prices, which they have, as much as they want to compete with that. So another thing is, U.S. have also increased the production in two ways. One is, the capacity utilization went up, and people got excited, but I think what they're also adding is new mills. When they add the new mills, the increase in capacity utilization will not look as good, although there is a serious increase in quantities that's being produced in the US. So for Turkey or any other country to really be competitive in the US is going to be tough for a while, unless we take that out at 25%. So without the 25%, anybody can compete in the US, but with that, it's going to be tough.
So coming to the third question, Turkish long products exports are almost entirely out of the US and the EU market. Which market do you expect the Turks to focus on? Well, we have made some discussions yesterday, and we are of the opinion that, and what we've seen already, that Turkey is more active now in Asia. That Turkey is taking away some markets from the Chinese, who cannot really compete with their current market prices over there. I think there is probably a gap of $30 to $40 a ton from our findings. And so we are expecting, and also what we hear is that Turkey will certainly focus much more on Asian countries, but also on Africa, North and West, but also Latin America, Israel and Yemen. So these are the findings which we got and discussed with some of the Turkish producers, and I think these are probably the remaining markets right now for them. And yeah, Europe will be certainly out. They have reached from the 300,000 tons, almost 200,000 tons within a week or less than a week. And the remaining 100,000 tons were gradually then exported to nearby countries because of the low lead times. So it's more manageable for countries like Bulgaria, Romania, to take the risk of buying Turkish material and to get it customs cleared pretty soon based on the open available quota. But other than that, they will be out now.
If you take out the Southeast Asia, really the other markets are too small. Yep. So that is the reason why you see almost 50% reduction in the production, because there's no place to go. And it came in a worse time because I can't say the world is in recession, but there is kind of a slowdown in many countries. So in their traditional countries that they sell, including what really moved Turkey for years is the local production. I mean, local consumption. So there was a huge construction boom in Turkey, which ended last year. Ever since, they lost the domestic market, which is the major thing for them.
All right, we are coming already to miscellaneous questions, so a mix of everything. And the first one is a very good question, which actually I would almost like the audience to answer. What is the role of a steel trader in today's market conditions? So, has anyone an explanation for that?
So, what is the new role, maybe we should say?
Maybe what is the new role, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, again, what is the role of a trader? I think the role of the trader really hasn't changed, but it's becoming even more challenging than ever. We are, how you called it yesterday, we are risk taker. Yeah, we are risk taker for supplier and customer, because with these threats and these uncertainties all over the place, it is more than ever a risk of doing business. I mean, we've seen it now with the European safeguard. Yeah, everybody thought, okay, Europe is a decent country, so they will decide, and then if it's put in written, then it will go on. And all of a sudden, during the race, they change the rule and say, oh, we will have another look. Do we really increase it by 5% on a yearly basis? And all of a sudden, oh, why a country like Turkey could take over the entire rest of the world quota, and the others were suffering. Let's change that again. So, I mean, people who were kind of relying on those rules and regulations, they can be caught, and the customers nor the suppliers want to take that risk. And so more and more it's the trader who is being asked to take that risk, same as in America, where also there isn't a huge risk, because with one tweet you can change the world. Exactly. And from 25%, Turkey is at 50%, and from 50 they are back to 25. God knows what's happening tonight. So it's...
I'm going to say that the role of the trader did evolve. In 80s, when we were trading, the trading company's biggest asset was know-how. We knew which mill to buy from, we knew which mill to deal with. which eventually eroded because with the internet age, everybody knows where the mills are, everybody knows where you can get the steel. So that thing that we had is gone. Today, then we became actually an important factor for the financing, because we still are actually. We became a financial institution for the distributors or consumers in our own countries, because they didn't want to tie up their money, and we did. So, which unfortunately we still are the banking for it. But lately, on our banking institution, we have this tough life where the trading environment is constantly changing. So I noticed that some of our clients who said, well, I can also issue a letter of credit, maybe I should get into your business, quickly realized that it is not as easy as it was before, because it's like a minefield, because you can really try to do the business and tomorrow the conditions change, and even when the conditions change, you're up with this new duties. And mind you, we're also dealing with anti-dumping or countervailing duties that's retroactive. And when they go retroactive a year, all the steel or whatever you brought and you thought you're making 2-3% or 5% that you thought you're making can be eroded very fast. So it is not an easy environment. You really have to have a lot of know-how and understanding and assume risk. And in that case, we as traders know that, understand that, and that's why we take risk. And I think that's why there is a serious role for a trader in this market, and it's going to continue like this for a while. But these are all traders here, so I'd like to hear your comments. All right, I guess they agree.
So then we move to the second question. With tight margins of today, financing expenses become a burden. Any new tool to make back-to-back business? I think we partly answered that question with what Don just mentioned. It is, of course, in this environment, extremely difficult just to make a back-to-back business where you hardly have a function. So I think the market is extremely competitive, and you need to have a function more than ever, because otherwise it will be difficult to even get any margin. And okay, the question is what is meant with back-to-back? Is it the, let's say, very, very old type fashion back-to-back business where you said, I know someone which you don't know, so I do it back-to-back, but
yeah, in a way. But if you're still doing the banking, you need to do back-to-back anyway. But I think on the financial expenses thing, what I heard this morning about Europe, if Europe prime rate is 1%, for God's sake, that is cheap. So if the European trader is borrowing 1%, and we in the US are paying 5%, there's a 4% difference. That's huge. So I don't know what the European rates are for real, in your trade. Is it like around 1%? Like he was saying this morning? You can say, it's all right.
No, I don't think that you really trade with 1% interest rate. I think it's probably more in the direction of 3%, taking the banks.
Okay. So, but it still is a great environment because you still have at least 2%, advantage over the American trade.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a big plus.
So coming to the third question, with Turkey seeking alternative markets for its long steel exports, how did the scenery change in Asia?
I mean, Turkey, one of the main markets for Turkey was Middle East. And Turkey used to export to those Middle East countries. Now they start to be a net exporter as well. So earlier, like 2011 up to 2015, Whenever we used to receive inquiry from Singapore, from Hong Kong, and relatively from Southeast Asia, so the Turkey used to export those material. But before receiving that inquiry right now to Turkey, we've been seeing some competition also from Malaysia, India, Middle East, and also Turkey. So there's a civil, the competition is going around for also Southeast Asia as well. So Turkey is right now is expecting good news from US, at least to open up new market. And Europe is with the quota is limited. So it looks like the only option left for Turkey is the Southeast Asia market, especially for long product, semi-product, and even for the flat product as well.
I don't know if everyone was here for the presentation of the South Asian markets this morning. I thought there's something alarming there because they were talking about, you know, a lot of new investments in Southeast Asia, and the investments mostly coming from China. So reality is China is diverting their production, you know, to those countries to sell back to US and Europe or whatever the other markets are. So pretty soon there will be an overproduction in those countries as well. So you will see the Chinese exports, then you will see the Southeastern, you know, South Asian exports. I think it's alarming because I think this quantities or the mills that they're building over there, and eventually if they all come out to the stream, you know, you will not be able to sell there. Plus, they will be selling to you, and it's not going to be that easy to go after every one of them, and to put an anti-dumping on them. So it's going to be really a much more difficult market to maintain going forward. I mean, I was alarmed when I was, you know, listening and seeing all the investments coming from China to the region and adding more quantities to what they already have. So for the Turks or anybody else thinking that they're going to sell in the region, I think it's eroding very fast.
I mean, we also clearly see that big investments are coming up in Southeast Asia. For example, till now, when we look at the 2019 production, globally, the average is 4.9% production increase compared to 2018. So when we look at the China, 10% increase. When we look at the Turkey, 10% down, cutting down production. But when we look at the Vietnam, 34% production increased. So with the new number of the production, which is coming up in Southeast Asia, it's already come up, 7 million ton in Vietnam, integrated mill. Malaysia, another 3.5 million ton already operated. Indonesia, another 3.5 million ton. And also, there are another potential which is already approved. For Malaysia, another 5 million ton is coming up. In Philippines, is within 3-5 years, we are expecting another 8 million ton to come up.
So how can you sell that region anymore? You basically consider that that business is going to evade, not only evade, they're going to come back and reinvade, you know, the rest of the world coming from that region. So all along we looked at China is the biggest, you know, monster in the deal, but I think you're going to have smaller ones coming from the south of it.
Exactly.
But those tonnages you mentioned, they are all long products, rebar wire rod, or?
Including flat product as well.
Including flat.
That's right.
Okay.
Well, still, it's a lot of tons.
Yeah, of course.
If you think about it, you know, that's as much as Europe produces.
All right, let's move to question number 4. How has the Brexit fiasco impacted the steel trade? What has been its impact on the steel industry in the UK? What has been the knock-on impact on the steel industry in the EU?
You can start.
Yeah, we honestly haven't seen so far a real impact. What we've seen so far is definitely a sharp decrease on the consumption in the automotive industry. But I think this is not only a Brexit matter, it's a general matter of the German car industry these days. And other than that, we have spoken with people from Great Britain, and they say, well, it's moving on like nothing has happened so far. So people are buying, at least talking about long products, rebars and so on. So they are buying, they are continuing, they're doing their business, and they really seem not to take care if Brexit is gonna be a hard one by end of October or a soft one, or if an extension may be agreed upon. So I think everybody is in a sit and wait situation, like the rabbit in front of the snake and waiting who is doing the first move. But right now it still is pretty.
Yeah. Well, from the American point of view, they like to see UK separate from EU so they can deal with, you know, the UK directly. They can do the business directly. And I have been listening the Turkish producers, they also would like to see the Brexit because that way the EU quotas won't apply. So they can sell to England directly and without any quotas. So it kind of makes sense. So I think that both US and Turkey are willing to see the Brexit happen, whether it is with a deal or without a deal.
Is anyone here from Britain to give a comment?
Go ahead.
Can we have a microphone here, please?
Well, if I would know, I would sit on a beach in Jamaica because I would be a millionaire, basically.
We would join you.
Exactly, I would invite you. Well, basically the situation is that Boris Johnson actually has lost a very important vote in Parliament, as you just said, that he is actually not allowed to do a no-deal Brexit on 31st of October. He has to ask for an extension, but it's quite uncertain if actually the EU members that have to agree to that extension agree. Especially France, actually, Macron pushed even the last time for now, guys, get it done. And this time we will push even more. And with the government, with the parliament prorogued, meaning like being on holiday, and there is a high court case against this prorogation, we see actually, we don't even know if parliament has to be on holiday or if they are allowed to operate. So, I mean, seriously, it's such a mess. And being in London, you're also in this kind of bubble, because everybody in London knows that it's kind of not a good idea. So actually, it is so highly uncertain, it's impossible to understand what's going on.
I mean, there is an uncertainty on when it's going to happen, but there is also the expectation that eventually something is going to happen. And if it does happen, obviously it's going to change everything, you know, the trade between Europe and England. So I heard that there's a lot of expectation of the uncertainty. Because of that, there is stocking in England. There's a lot of people trying to stock. So there people are buying stuff and stocking so that they cannot get affected or with the low rates, because it's zero coming from Europe. Everything is zero today, and tomorrow it can go 10%, 15%, whatever the rate it is. So there is still, you know, that type of trade is going on. And after that, what happens is another uncertainty. But eventually it looks like it's going to happen, but we don't know when.
Exactly, I would agree on that. At the end of the day, it has to happen because there was a vote. And if now Parliament or even the government basically goes against this public vote, that's quite a massive, would be a massive thing to go literally against the public vote. And what you just said is totally right. We saw a huge stocking cycle in February and March, as far as I know, before the original Brexit dates where basically also even steel demand, I think, like it's kind of peaked and a lot of demand was brought forward and industrial production increased. But this was just a stocking thing. And then 1 or 2 months later, all the indicators just slumped. Chris says that's about right, isn't it? Yeah, so actually we even saw that's for steel and manufacturing goods.
I always thought that Boris is trying to use the Trump negotiation tactics of saying, I'm going to exit no matter what, and meanwhile forcing European hand to make a deal before he exits. So I think that the parliament kind of ruined his game, saying you can't do that.
Basically, it has already done that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Boris Johnson just wanted to go there like the hard man that, you know, smashes on the table, and we do it like that, and government and the parliament put a stop sign on, and now even the High Court could do that again by saying the prorogation was unlawful, and then basically you end up with a full-blown constitutional crisis in UK that comes on top of all the Brexit mess that we see. So yeah, exciting times.
Looks like you need a dictatorship like we have in the US.
Well, don't make me comment on that now.
I just wanted to add to that. What Boris was trying to do is, yes, he was using a Trump negotiating tactic. He wanted to leave his options on the table. He wanted to say, look, EU, if you don't give me a good deal, we're going to crash out come October 31st. And Boris Johnson knows that the EU does not want a hard Brexit either. So he wanted to keep his cards in his pocket. Of course, the Parliament realizes that this is not a good outcome for the UK, so they came and took his legs out from under him. And now he's been left in a very tricky position where he doesn't really have much negotiating power. But really, the main impact of Brexit so far has been the uncertainty. As Alex mentioned, there was a lot of stockpiling around the original exit date because the industry really didn't know what to expect. And that uncertainty has been prolonged every single time the date has been pushed back. And now we're looking at potentially January for Brexit. And who knows what's going to happen after that. Every 3 months, we're going to keep pushing it back 3 months until eventually something happens or doesn't happen. But we saw a presentation earlier by the guy from, I think it was the guy from Commerzbank. He showed the UK investment index, and it really just plummeted post the Brexit referendum and has stayed down since then. So really, everyone's in a sort of wait-and-see approach, see what's going to happen before making any big investments, and that's really the biggest impact from Brexit so far. You've left the UK market stagnant for 3 years.
It sounds like, you know, we all live that, you know, if one of your best employees come to you and say, you know, unless you give me a raise, I will leave the company. So it's a tough decision. Do you want him to leave the company, or do you want to give him a raise? So it's part of the tough negotiation is there, really. You've got to have to decide which one is better for you. And Europe is not an easy community to make any decision. So that makes it even tougher because they're not dealing with one country. They're dealing with a lot of noise that really don't even agree among each other. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Over there, please. The lady.
I'm from Ronley in the UK, and we're trading in long and flat products. I don't think it's correct to say that our market's just carrying on regardless, actually, because what we're finding is that a lot of contracts that were expected to be called off are not being called off. Construction's really slowed down considerably. Stockpiling, I'm not aware of any of our customers knowingly or with knowledge stockpiling. I think what happened was that they've placed orders, but the contracts which those orders were placed for haven't been called off, and so they're ending up sitting with stock. Mm-hmm. Obviously, a lot of stockpiling, if you can call it that, of Turkish rebar was to beat the safeguarding. So a lot of rebar came into the UK and Ireland at the beginning of the year, but that was to try to beat the safeguarding, which actually, as it turned out, was a difficult situation for everybody. So,
well,
yeah,
but
exactly.
I think this subject is really, UK buying from Europe with zero duty. So yeah, I know that Turkey can sell to UK after the Brexit anyway, but the key thing is I don't know exactly which products they buy directly from Europe, but if there is any, let's say, stainless steel or any other product that they buy from Europe with zero duty, I mean, it's wise to have some stock there because there will definitely be some distortion.
There may have been some products that, because at one point we didn't know when we were buying from the EU whether it would be duty-free or whether there would suddenly be a duty. But, I mean, another thing to consider as well is that whether we leave with a deal or without a deal, we're not really structured at the moment to understand the implications of just opening the doors and having everything at zero duty. So I think our government, in any case, will probably continue with the EU guidelines that have been in place for many years with regard to anti-dumping and safeguarding. So I think if we leave without a deal, I don't think it means that the doors are open and suddenly there's going to be zero duty on imports of steel. I think they're probably going to follow what's in place until such time that they have the chance to review it, which could be months or years.
Well, I hope you're right, but I can tell you that Trump is banking on the opposite.
I guess he is, but I'm not sure he's right either. So.
Okay.
Any other comment on that? Yeah, but I think we realized already from these comments that there is a huge uncertainty, and uncertainty is never ever good for a market because depends on what kind of person you are. You see it negative, you see it positive, but in the end of the day, nobody really has a crystal ball. And so I think, and I'm afraid we still have to wait a couple of weeks more and then to see what new situation we will be confronted with, and then we are more smart and clever. So coming to point 5 of the questions, how much of an impact do you think the freight market will see because of the new IMO sulfur limit in fuel oil used by ships, which will be the effect from 1st of January 2020?
We had a brief discussion on that yesterday, and what's going to affect is the bulk shipment, from what I understand from the conversation we had, because the bulk carriers are old, and they really have to work on, and this conversion is going to hurt them. But the container carriers already been modernized, and they already have the sulfur emissions, I understand, under control. So the major effect you will see is going to be on the bulk side versus the container side. So how it will affect our steel industry, I guess we're going to carry more on the containers, if the length allows, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, containers, as we all know, for steel trade and especially for commodities is extremely uncompetitive and very badly handleable. Only the stuffing and the destuffing of those containers, considering long products, for example, is a disaster. Most of the consumers, especially for rebars, wire rods, so they are not used to this type.
Well, you're saying that, but we heavily use it. I mean, in 2014, when the prices jumped, 2004, when the prices jumped on the bulk carriers, we started using the containers. And believe me, we are in anything that we don't have a length issue, because our like big beams and whatnot, or even rebar that is 40 foot, is hard to carry in a container. Although we can still squeeze the 40-foot rebar in a 40-foot container because we put diagonal. But on beams and whatnot, it's difficult. So really, the main issue is the length. If you take the length out, we already taught all our stevedores learn how to destuff a container. So it's that we already passed many years ago.
Any other comments on this subject?
How many of you use bulk? Majority of your trade bulk, and how many of you use the containers? Let me ask first containers. How many of you utilize containers for your steel? Wow. Yeah.
Can you take the microphone, please?
Okay. Yes, from India and all that, you're saying there's not that many vessels. But I'm surprised. I'm really surprised. I thought that majority of you are using containers. Maybe I should not encourage you, so the price will not go up.
Then you can
keep on doing what you're doing, yes. but really, we do heavily use it. And only because some of our quantities went down. I mean, we used to bring 10, 20,000 tons at a time on each commodity, and that decreased. And when you have 2,000, 3,000 tons to get bulk carriers is tougher. So then we really had to go back to containers. And container, yes, it's more expensive, but it's practical and it's fast.
Yeah, but for example, on the beam business, you see also more container. If you talk, for example, about Saab, they are delivering a lot of material in containers. And on the flat product side, there's a lot of container shipment nowadays. But also on the beam side, at least what is coming to Europe. And yeah.
Are they using 45-foot containers?
Yes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's not enough of them. I always thought that by now there will be a lot more 45-foot containers, open-top containers,
yes,
and side-loaded containers. I mean, these are not tough things. I always thought that, after 10 years of us using, steel industry using the containers, side loading is not that hard, so you can use your forklifts, basically straight forklifts, to take it out. But we're still using beams, what we call boom, and then tie it. It's not that easy, but I don't know why the industry didn't change or didn't adapt to the newer containers to make it happen. And 45-foot is not the toughest thing, but there's not enough. Sometimes we wait a month for a 45-foot container to arrive.
Let's see. I'm convinced it will grow. Yeah, the container shipment will grow.
Yeah, especially when they have the price advantage, right?
Yeah, also on the quantities. Quantities have drastically changed. So in the past, you had 10,000 ton loads. Nobody would think about a container. Yeah. Today, when you think about niche business, when you think about going to Eastern European countries, suddenly you talk about totally different quantities. Yes. Where I think most of us would have said 10 years ago, I would not even touch it. So I think that our kind of trade is changing on a daily basis, as we all know. But this is a tendency I can see at least for Europe.
Yeah. So not only safeguard in Section 232, but also now the next threat of the environmental issues and expected higher freight rates or lesser capacities.
Yeah. I think if you look at the environmental issues, you're looking for increasing at everything, because that will increase your cost of energy. If your cost of energy goes up, everything else will go up. So it's all related. But one is coming 2020, faster than the others.
Yeah, and not to be forgotten is also the products which are more protected in containers. I mean, we have a lot of business from China, which is going to North Africa and wherever, and the customers insist on their container shipment because for pre-painted, coated materials, it's still the same. So I think containers, 20 foot anyway, are readily available, and the freight rates are cheaper most of the times than the bulk.
I was really surprised to see so few people using containers. I really thought that at least 50% is already using it. I'm surprised. You heavily use it. Anyway.
All right. Coming to the next question. The drone attack on Saudi Arabian oil production facilities on the Saturday before last caused the biggest disruption ever to global oil production and was followed by the highest ever daily spike in oil prices. Higher oil prices, and these are even more likely in the longer term if there is a further escalation in the region, could lead to faster inflation and slower growth in the global economy. What would be the main impacts to watch out for in the steel markets?
Reality is the interruption in Saudi Arabia is not a big deal. Number one, they said they're going to fix it very fast. Number two, today they're not the biggest oil producers in the world. The U.S. is. So, I think the gap that if you take out the whole Saudi Arabia, I don't think it's going to make a whole lot of difference in the world, because Russia can increase their production, U.S. can increase their production. I mean, the only reason why you don't have more production coming from the U.S. is because we don't have any place to sell it. So it's there. We have the technology. We have the ability. We have so many wells drilled, but not finished. I mean, so many wells. So imagine that there is a shortage. We can finish those wells within 90 days. 90 days, we can come back up and close the gap. So I don't think it makes a whole lot of difference. But what it showed to us is that how vulnerable these countries are, and how vulnerable any one of those facilities are, including nuclear facilities. That was something that is to think about. I mean, drones to attack the nuclear facility, now that's a disaster, which you cannot overcome.
No. I mean, Saudi Arabia's participation to the German oil supply is 7%. So
That's it.
It's not really meaningful.
So we'll take care of you.
Thank you very much. So if I need some gasoline for my car, I can come to you.
Right.
All right. So coming to the last part of the questions. What is your forecast and outlook about construction markets, demand-supply balance in each major region for the world of the last quarter of 2019? And then we start with A, Latin America, and B, Central America. I think we can put this together, Don?
Yeah. Well, actually, the conditions in Latin America, or really South America, is not good. We have a serious problem going on in Argentina. They have, they have devaluated their currencies. They have serious inflation. So it's a disaster going on, and I don't think that you will see any improvement anytime soon. Brazil is going through their own, I mean, they try to do some cleanup. It's better than before, but it still is in trouble. Well, you go to Venezuela, you already know that there's nothing going on there. It's just basically stopped. Colombia was doing okay, but now there is the FARC group is starting back up again, so then they have issues as well. Overall, South America is I don't think it's going to be a big player in the market. I think the only two countries that's probably doing fine is Chile and Peru, which is basically carrying its own weight and really buying a lot of steel coming from China. Now, Central America, there's really not a whole lot of news going on. I mean, if you consider Mexico is central, which they consider themselves North America, yes, Mexico is doing very well. Mexico has really a big increase because they're selling to the U.S. right now. And so the only economy that I see doing well, really well in Latin America is Mexico.
So coming to Europe, Europe is a very puzzled and mixed situation right now. We have certainly in the parts like Germany, Belgium, and Netherlands a very good demand. We have a number of big projects which really consume a lot of steel over the next years. Infrastructure, highways, rail tracks, bridges, and. And we have, however, a very unpleasant situation in Italy with a lack of demand. Spain, from what I heard, is also still on a, well, so la basis. They got saying they did not go down with the demand, but also there is no significant increase, so they are around 1 million tons again. And Eastern Europe is also slowing down a bit. We saw Poland was coming up some 6 months, 12 months ago. They had a better market. This obviously has also slowed down now. So it's quite a mixed picture. And well, Great Britain, we just discussed that in length, is also extreme difficult region these days. So I think what we have, however, discovered is that the very nice market in Europe over the last 18 months, I would say, and it's in particular in Germany and Netherlands, have attracted the producers to increase the production capacities or utilization of their capacities, because they were before at a lower rate, and because of the real good profit situation they have seen, which was of course also an effect of the safeguard and uncertainties, they have increased the capacity utilization, and by that they have obviously pushed the bottom too hard, and they see now as a reaction that the prices came under pressure because there was too much demand. And of course also markets like Italy are pushing heavily into the European markets because they cannot afford anymore, or they cannot sell competitively anymore to export markets like America or like Africa. Yeah, Algeria is more and more out, having their own production facilities. So I think the overcapacity in Europe is moving on, and with more markets getting in difficulties with the financial situation, probably this will move on, and so in my opinion we will see a difficult market situation for the next 6 months, but also with a big risk and possibility that the prices may strike and go up again, because we are right now on levels of a price. If scrap is not falling down further, the mills have to react and have to increase the price. And also we know that the safeguard quotas for most of the countries have been already exhausted, especially for those who are competitive. And for those who are not competitive, they will probably vanish in the air. And so there is a good possibility for the mills to increase the prices, but it's a matter of demand and consumption, also demand and production. So let's come to Middle East and Southeast Asia. Maybe you can put this together.
Sure. For the Middle East, we all know that Turkey was the main supplier to Middle East, especially for the long product, for the rebar. But when we look at the Saudi Arabia, for example, in 2016, Turkey sold about 1 million ton of rebar to Saudi Arabia in 2016. And 2017 was less than 50,000 ton, 2018, 0, 2019, nothing. So one of the main reasons is because the local demand in Middle East also was not sufficient for the also local producer as well. This is one of the main reasons. And the second thing is the export tax, which used to be about 5% and became a 10%. And the area, Middle East, was a net importer of the long product. Now became a net exporter. So the Middle East started to be a net exporter of the mainly long product to Southeast Asia. So, and also, when we look at the Asian side, what we see is, for example, Taiwan and South Korea, they increased their production by 1.1%. And they, also, as we have mentioned earlier, Vietnam increased their production 31.5%. Only Japan reduced their production by 3.6%. Generally, what we see is for the next coming period, also Southeast Asia, we will be seeing some production increase as well. So that will be civil the competition from that area. For the Africa business, still is going on, mainly from Turkey, mainly for the container business. And also, all depends on the price in China. Sometimes it's replacing with the Chinese material. And they usually for the flat product. But for the long product, we see that Turkey is having the more, big player compared to China. And I just would like to mention to you about the price level in China, just to have an idea. Billets from China, although, as you know, there's no export, which is 480 FOB. And rebar, 465, which is about $60, $55–60 higher than Turkey. And also almost same price with the Indian rebar prices. And the wire rod price is $480 compared to Turkey, we can say about $50 price differences. And the hot rolled coil price is $460. This is the FOB prices, which is replaced recently from India.
All right. Any question from the audience, which is not put here? Ladies first, if you don't mind.
So we heard today that Turkey has quite tremendously cut production. So do you think that this will have an effect, a further effect on the scrap price?
Probably.
Probably.
Actually, I was listening to the traders today, scrambling, trying to see where the end is. But you're gonna have to think this way, there's a limit below which the scrap collectors will not sell them scrap. Now, right now, when you see the prices where they are, it's because the collectors thought that, they can get cheaper scrap, so they kept buying. So there's a lot of scrap in the yards waiting, and they always thought that the price is going to go up and they can sell them all. So as long as they have those stocks there, I think they're going to have to do something about it. But really, there's a lower number, and I would say below 200 is almost not possible. Sustained below 200 is not possible. No, I mean, anything can hit down and up, but just like 350, when you reach 350 level, above that was not sustainable. Below that price is not sustainable. So whatever it is today, you already know the numbers. I don't want to give an exact number, but yes, there's still a possibility for it to go down some more before it starts picking up again.
Yeah, there is a natural end of the price, because if it makes no sense anymore for the collector to go out and to drive his cars through the streets. But surprisingly, talking to European producers, they are looking and searching for scrap. They don't find the scrap, and definitely not at the price that they wish to get. And so it looks like some scrap dealers are already pulling the brake and are not giving this material away, because they know the recollection price will be probably higher than the resale price today. So they better wait and hoping for better prices. And there is from a number of suppliers and producers, there is already the big fear that we will see a real rebound in the scrap price in not too long time from now.
But winter is coming.
And winter is coming.
And
winter is coming as well, yeah.
Okay. And there was a question there.
Over there?
Yes. Yes, I'm not a trader. I'm a supplier to North American steel manufacturers. I'm going to, it's kind of an involved question, but I'm looking for your input. From my observations, many North American steel producers for a number of years, they've complained about dumping and unfair trade practices, et cetera. Here, there's a lot of discussion, understandably, from the trader's perspective about capacities, supply and demand. My question involves how much is the technology in the manufacturing of steel involved in the price versus capacity? Specifically in the US, I'll read occasionally where old mills come online. I've not been reading where, oh, we've invested millions of dollars to make them competitive with the new Chinese plants being built in Southeast Asia. So my curiosity is, let's say Trump loses the next election, let's say those tariffs go away, will these new plants that have come online in Southeast Asia now be even more efficient and be more competitive compared to other plants that have been brought back online?
Well, it's a very good point. Number one, in the US, they're adding new capacity, and there's two ways to add capacity. They're building new mills. They're building new modern mills. Along with, they're bringing the old, really uncompetitive mills back in the market, because with the 25%, they become competitive. Now, when the conditions change, obviously the first thing that's going to go out is the old mills. So I think you will see the US Steel going bankrupt again and try to go to survive again. So, but mills like Nucor or Commercial Metals, they have a good chance because they have newer mills. Southeast Asia, you know, I guess the anti-dumping and countervailing, these things are there to stay. So US will always use those tools. So in fact, when I was listening this morning about what the gentleman was saying in the Southeast Asia, I really think that those are the mills coming from China as a diversion to the US, which will be stopped. Already started to talk about Vietnam, but I think Malaysia, Indonesia, they're all in Taiwan, Thailand, they all are under review now. So those mills, they're going to have to sell to the rest of the world, most probably will not sell to the US. Any other questions? Is that okay? Is that an answer to you? Okay, very good, thank you.
All right, good. Then thank you very much to you for listening. And yeah, we just hope that we brought a little light into the obscure times in which we are in and which are in front of us. So I wish you still a nice day in Duesseldorf and hope to see you again in, what was it, in? Belgrade next March. Thank you very much.